Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time it looks like we're going exploring, a world of sound that we can't even hear. Infrasound, huh? You guys sent over a ton of research and articles and even some notes on how it's used in industry, so I think it's safe to say we're all ready to jump into this hidden world.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating area. Imagine like an entire orchestra playing a symphony so low that it just bypasses our ears entirely. That's infrasound. Sound waves that are vibrating well below 20 hertz.
Whoa. So I'm seeing stuff here about elephants using it to communicate over miles, and even some, potential downsides to those massive wind turbines we see popping up everywhere. So where do we even begin with something that we can't even hear?
Well, the interesting thing is that infrasound really is everywhere. But because we can't see it, I guess that makes it even more intriguing. Like, think about the rumble of an earthquake, or that far-off roar of a volcano, or even those, subtle pulses you feel from ocean waves crashing on the shore. It's like nature's got its own subwoofer or something.
Okay, so it's not just something humans made.
Hmm.
But if we can't perceive it, why should we even care about these, silent tremors? Why bother measuring and studying infrasound?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. I think measuring infrasound gives us like a sixth sense, a way to tap into things beyond what we normally see and hear. And one of the biggest uses for it is in understanding our planet. Geologists use infrasound to monitor earthquakes. And not just the big ones that we can feel, but like those tiny tremors that tell us the Earth's crust is shifting. It's like, I don't know, it's like an early warning system that's listening to the planet breathe.
Yeah, and I see here they even use it to track volcanic activity. So instead of waiting for the mountain to, blow its top, scientists can actually kind of hear the pressure building up underground.
Exactly. So infrasound monitoring gives these volcanologists like a window into this whole subterranean world. They can actually track how the magma's moving and see how the pressure is changing, which could tell them if an eruption is about to happen, which obviously gives people time to evacuate and prepare. And that could save lives.
Now, that's impactful,
Uh-huh.
but it's not just about natural disasters, is it? I'm seeing some pretty fascinating uses for infrasound in the military, too, and for defense stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Infrasound can travel really, really far, so that makes it super valuable for detecting explosions. Like, think about organizations like the CTBTO, that's the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, and they use a whole network of infrasound sensors all over the world to make sure no one's testing nuclear weapons in secret.
So it's like a watchdog for the whole planet, huh? Listening for any rumbles that might mean someone's breaking the rules. That's wild. And I'm noticing here that there are a bunch of sources talking about how infrasound is used in industrial settings too, to keep things running safely.
Definitely. Machines, especially the giant ones they use in factories, they all make infrasound as they work. But even a tiny change in the sound signature of a machine could be like an early warning that something's about to break.
So instead of waiting for some big catastrophic failure, they can use infrasound to do preventative maintenance. It's like giving these giant machines a voice so they can tell us when they need a checkup.
Exactly. It's a really smart way to keep things safe, make sure those machines keep running, and make the whole process more efficient. It just goes to show you how something invisible can have a really big impact on the real world.
All right, so we've seen how this silent symphony can help us keep an eye on the planet, detect explosions, even keep our factories running. But there's another side to this whole thing, right? These sources are mentioning some potential negative effects, especially at high intensities.
Yeah, well, there is growing evidence that if you're exposed to really intense infrasound for a long time, it could actually be bad for your health. Think about people who work around these loud machines all day, or maybe people who live really close to a major source of infrasound. It's something we really need to look into.
Yeah, and I see some research here on how it impacts the heart, and even some disturbing stuff about potential effects on the brain. I mean, if these waves can shake the earth, I guess it makes sense that they could mess with our bodies too.
That's a good point. There was this study in Germany that found that high-intensity infrasound actually made heart muscle tissue weaker in the lab. So imagine what that could mean for people who are exposed to these high levels every day. We definitely need to do more research to figure out the long-term effects and set some safety limits.
Okay, so things are getting a little more complicated now. It seems like this powerful tool might have some downsides. But before we get into all that, I'm curious, how do we even measure something we can't hear? What kind of technology can pick up these silent tremors?
Well, that's where the amazing ingenuity of science comes in.
Mhm.
To measure infrasound, we need some really special equipment that can pick up those tiny, tiny changes in air pressure that are caused by these ultra low frequency waves.
Hmm. So it's not your average microphone then. What are we talking about here?
Think of it like a super-powered eardrum. We use these things called microbarometers. They're designed to pick up these teeny tiny changes in air pressure that infrasound makes. Imagine trying to hear a whisper in a room full of people shouting, you know? That's the kind of sensitivity we're dealing with here.
Whoa. So we're basically building machines that can hear what our ears can't.
Yeah.
But then how do you filter out all the other noise? How do you know you're actually measuring infrasound and not like a truck driving by?
Well, that's where things get really tricky. Scientists use these sophisticated arrays of microbarometers, and they place them really strategically so they can capture those infrasound waves. And then they use some really complex algorithms to get rid of all that extra noise and isolate the specific infrasound signals. It's kind of like sifting for gold, you know? You got to separate the good stuff from all that sand.
Okay, so it's like this whole combination of cutting-edge hardware and powerful software that lets us peek into this hidden world. And I guess as that technology gets better, who knows what else we might find, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a field that's always evolving, and that's what makes it so cool. There are even some researchers out there who are trying to use infrasound to study the upper atmosphere. They're looking at things like atmospheric gravity waves. Those are like ripples of energy that travel through the air, and even auroras.
Whoa, so we're not just listening to the Earth anymore. We're tuning into the sky now, too. But okay, let's go back to those potential downsides we talked about earlier. The concerns about human health, especially at those high intensities. Are we talking about anything specific here, or is it all still a bit of a mystery?
Well, there's definitely still a lot we don't know, but we've got enough evidence to know that we need to be careful. There are quite a few studies that have linked long-term exposure to high-intensity infrasound to all sorts of health problems, like sleep problems, headaches, even feelings of anxiety and, like, disorientation.
Yeah, I can imagine that living near a constant source of intense infrasound would be, well, pretty awful,
Yeah.
especially if you don't even know what's causing all these symptoms, like being haunted by a sound you can't even hear.
That's a great way to put it. And then you've got that whole debate about wind turbines. I mean, some people who live near these giant wind farms say they experience all kinds of symptoms that they think are caused by the infrasound coming from the turbines.
Right, I remember seeing some pretty heated discussions in these sources about whether it's actually a real thing or, like, all in their heads. What do you think, based on the research we've got here?
Well, it's a really complicated issue. We definitely need more research to figure out whether it's the infrasound that's causing the problems or if it's something else in the environment. It's important to look at it from both sides, acknowledge that there might be a problem, but also wait for more solid scientific proof before we jump to conclusions.
So, no easy answers then.
Yeah.
But let's change gears for a minute and talk about something a little more sensational. Have you ever heard of the brown note?
Ah, yes, the legendary brown note, the infrasound frequency that's supposed to make you instantly, lose control of your bowels. It's been this crazy thing people have been talking about for decades.
Yeah. Some of these sources are even saying it could be used as a weapon. But is there any real science behind this infamous brown note? Or is it just an urban legend?
Well, a lot of people have tried to prove that it's real, but so far there hasn't been a single scientific study that's actually been able to do it. It seems like it's still just a story, something people talk about online and stuff.
So, no secret weapon to clear out a crowded room then. Probably for the best, when you think about it. But even if it's not real, it just shows you how much power we give to this idea of infrasound. It's like this invisible force that we imagine can control our bodies and our emotions.
It really speaks to our fascination with the unknown, doesn't it? Infrasound. Because it's invisible and it might be able to affect us without us even knowing it. It really captures our imagination. And it makes us curious, but also a little afraid.
It just goes to show you that there's so much more to the world than what we can experience with our five senses. There are all these hidden realms out there, just waiting for us to explore them. But before we go any further into this uncharted territory, I'm curious, what parts of infrasound research are you most interested in?
Well, one of the things that I find really, really cool is how infrasound is used for animal communication. Kind of touched on it earlier, but imagine, listening in on a conversation between elephants that are miles apart, or figuring out what those complex whale songs really mean. It's like, cracking a secret code.
You're right. That's one part of all this that really got me thinking. It's wild to think about these animals using infrasound to do, well, everything. Like finding their way around, meeting up with other elephants or whales, and even working together as a group. And we're totally oblivious.
Yeah, it kind of makes you realize that we're not the only ones who communicate, right? We're so focused on what we can hear that we miss this whole other world of sound that's going on all around us. I think if we could figure out how animals use infrasound, we could learn so much about how they behave and how they interact with their environment.
I wonder if we'll ever be able to use infrasound to talk to animals too. Imagine what we could do if we could communicate with them, like helping with conservation efforts or even just making friends with other species. But let's get back to the human side of things. We've been talking about the risks of being exposed to high levels of infrasound, but what about the levels we experience every day? Do we know if that's having any kind of effect on us,
Yeah.
even if we don't realize it?
That's something we still don't know much about. But there are some studies out there that suggest that even low levels of infrasound might be messing with our mood, our thinking, and even how we feel in general. Like maybe there's this constant hum in the background that we don't even notice, but it's changing how our bodies work without us knowing.
That's a little creepy when you think about it. Like, there's this invisible force out there that's shaping our lives, and we have no idea. But maybe that's part of what makes infrasound so interesting, right?
Yeah.
It makes us question everything we thought we knew about the world.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about science. We're always pushing the boundaries of what we know, looking into places that used to be hidden, and finding new mysteries that make us rethink everything. And infrasound is a perfect example of that. It shows us how much we still have to learn and how much we can discover just by listening to the world around us, even the sounds we can't hear.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? All these animals out there talking to each other in ways we can't even hear. It's like a whole secret world of communication going on right under our noses.
Totally. And it makes you wonder, what else are we missing? What other sounds are out there that we just haven't figured out how to listen to yet?
Right. And it's not just about the animals either. I think there's still so much we can learn about how infrasound affects humans. I mean, we talked about the potential risks of high-intensity exposure, but what about the everyday levels we're all surrounded by? Are those affecting us in ways we don't even realize? That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a scary thought, right? That this invisible force could be influencing our mood or our behavior without us even knowing it.
It is a bit creepy when you think about it, but hey, maybe that's part of what makes infrasound so fascinating. It forces us to question what we think we know about the world, and it pushes us to keep exploring and asking new questions.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive. Infrasound is this mysterious force that we're only beginning to understand, and it has the potential to impact everything from our planet to our technology to our own bodies and minds.
Exactly. It just goes to show you that the world is full of mysteries, and the more we explore, the more we realize how much we don't know.
Well said. And on that note, I want to say a huge thank you to you all for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of infrasound. And to our amazing expert, thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
And for all of you listening out there, if you found this deep dive as fascinating as we did, be sure to hit that like button on YouTube and share this episode with your friends. Let's get more people thinking about the hidden wonders of our world. And if you want to keep exploring with us, don't forget to subscribe to the All Sorts podcast and follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We're always diving into something new, so come along for the ride.
Until next time, keep those ears open and maybe those other senses too. You never know what you might discover out there.